Coping with Tre Tailor, giving you info and advice to help you thrive and survive in life, because we'll always be coping with something. Coping.
Hey there. Thank you again so much for joining us for Coping. I'm Tre Tailor. We're giving you info and advice to help you thrive and survive in life because we will always be coping with something. Today, we're coping with Black history in South Carolina, and we're going to speak with Claflin University Assistant Professor Dr. Robert Greene about Modjeska Simkins. But first, don't forget, we are streaming live on the Tailor Made production page on Facebook. That's the home of Coping, hosted by Tre Tailor. Please go over there, hit like and share and follow, and find out when we go live. Celebrating our third year anniversary in March. Information, advice, and so many resources to help you cope. We also have a presence on Instagram and also on Twitter. Hey, don't forget, scrolling at the bottom of the screen, you'll see information about where to get a COVID test, a COVID vaccination, scholarship information, financial resources, and so much more. So please don't forget to post and share so we can get the message to the masses. I'm Tre Tailor, and you are watching Coping, hosted by me, Tre Tailor. And today we're coping with Black history in South Carolina. Claflin University Assistant Professor Dr. Robert Greene joins us. He is a published author of more than 350 articles, including being seen in the Washington Post. Most recently, he co-edited the book Invisible No More, documenting the experiences of African Americans at USC. We're coping with Black history today in South Carolina and Modjeska Simkins. Dr. Greene, first of all, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, tell us first, who is or was Modjeska Simkins?
You know, I think it's easy to say that Modjeska Simkins is probably the most important civil and human rights advocate you've not heard of.
Wow.
She was, I mean, I really do mean that. She was a native of South Carolina. Her life really spanned most of the 20th century. And she was a tireless advocate for civil rights, human rights, political rights, whatever rights you can think of within the Palmetto State.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I just over the weekend saw a documentary, a year-old documentary about women at USC, and her name came up several times.
Right. Yeah. You know, Modjeska Simkins was actually a leading advocate for the segregation of schools in South Carolina. And in fact, one of her relatives, Henry Monteith, actually
yes.
one of the first people to attend USC in the 20th century. She was part of the first 3 Black students to attend USC in 1963. But the thing is that Modjeska Simkins was an advocate for her to go to USC. But about 20 years before that, Simkins was a supporter of the creation of a law school at SC State in Orangeburg, South Carolina. She felt that both options in terms of desegregation were critical for Black Americans in the state to really realize their own potential. And so if you think about civil rights in the state from around maybe 1920 until 1990, Modjeska Simkins is involved in some form or fashion.
Wow. So she played a major role in African American history, and her contributions are great. So it sounds like she was really advocating for equal educational rights.
Yes, that's one of the things that she's known for. Simkins was also a major advocate for healthcare in South Carolina. She was actually the first Black person to work for the state government as the head of the Tuberculosis Association that actually handled public health, healthcare in the state. And she felt that Black Americans could not really have true human rights unless they had access to quality healthcare, which of course is still an important issue in South Carolina and the entire country in 2023. So in some ways, Simkins was like ahead of the curve in terms of thinking about these critical issues and how civil rights and human rights and healthcare all link together. She was also a champion of Black political rights in the state of South Carolina. At times, she advocated for the creation of a Black political party in the state. At other times, she advocated for working with civil and human rights activists, no matter their political affiliation. And so, for example, in the 1940s and 50s, she worked with activists in the state who were really more so on the left end of the spectrum, with the Progressive Democratic Party that was formed in 1944. She formed other organizations in the state, all in an attempt to provide an alternative to Jim Crow segregation in South Carolina.
Yeah, at the beginning of the interview, you said she is the greatest civil rights leader you've never heard about. And you would think, with all of her accolades, all of the things that she did, and as you said, I mean, she was an advocate in education, healthcare, political rights. Why don't more people know about, have heard about, have written about Modjeska Simkins, do you think?
I think there are a couple of reasons for this. The first reason is that when it comes to civil rights history, broadly speaking, we tend to focus on a few individuals. Martin
Yeah.
Luther King Jr., maybe Rosa Parks, maybe W.E.B. Du Bois,
Yeah.
a few others, and that's about it. What that downplays is, number one, how radical those people were, but number two, how each state, each community has civil rights icons in them. And I
Yeah.
think what makes Modjeska Simkins so unique is that she was an activist in South Carolina. What tends to happen with civil rights history in South Carolina is that the Palmetto State gets glossed over. Its contributions are not as readily known, even the people who live in the state. So, for example, if you go to the State House grounds right now, there is the African American monument behind the State House, but most of the statues there are to former Confederates, former segregationists, etc. Simkins has a portrait in the State House, but beyond that, and the fact that her house is a historic site kept up by Historic Columbia and National Park Service, there really isn't much in the city or the state to commemorate what Simkins actually did. In fact, the whole reason our school, Modjeska Simkins School of Human Rights, is named after her is a testament to how she was a tireless champion for human rights, but still isn't getting the kind of credit she deserves, even in 2023. So I hope that in the future, more South Carolinians will learn about Simkins and start to realize that this state has plenty of homegrown heroes and heroines that should be better known.
Yeah. And people need to know that about South Carolina. We need to know more than Strom Thurmond and you know,
Right.
and the Confederate and the flag and, you know, all of those things. So I love that this is kind of being focused on, because even though the Modjeska Simkins home is in Columbia, South Carolina, I still think there's I don't know, it's people are blinded by, again, not only who she was and her significance, because I think once you know that, once you know, like you say, that you are right here in a city, in a state, that it can happen here too.
That is a really good point. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that even folks who live in South Carolina tend to associate the state's history with just segregation, racism, slavery, and so
Yeah.
forth. But the state also has a long and storied tradition of progressive activism, of fighting back against those forces. And I think the chief reason Simkins is not better known is that she is actually the foremost representation of that legacy. Because again, she mentored several generations of activists. I think it doesn't help her that she is a Black woman. Black women
Yeah.
tend to be downplayed in these movements as well, unfortunately. But if you look at Simkins' record, she interacted with so many of the civil rights activists in and out. And she was someone who was also instrumental in the environmental movement, the women's rights movement, the anti-war movement during Vietnam, the movement for peace during the Cold War. She was basically active in whatever movement you can think of in the 20th century in South Carolina. But we have to do the difficult and necessary work of making sure folks don't forget about her and other activists like her, because I think otherwise, if we leave this history just to state alone, folks like her will be easily and safely ignored.
Yeah. Dr. Robert Greene joins us. He served as Claflin University lead instructor since 2019, where they continue a long and storied tradition of linking civics, political action, and also lifelong learning, focusing on teaching the spirit of justice, freedom, and equality, so that that so many of South Carolinians have fought for through the centuries. In an age like ours, where teaching true history is under attack. That's a whole nother conversation for another day
Yeah,
that I'd love to talk to you about. But first, I do want to applaud you all at Claflin for forging forward and teaching history to our students, where, as it says, in a time where, you know, critical race theory and all types of things, you know, folks don't want you to know or want us to teach our young people the truth. you know. But like I said, that's the question. That's a conversation for another day. But you can chime in if you want, and then we'll continue with Modjeska Simkins.
Right. Well, I think in terms of talking about just the role of HBCUs right now, and my day job as a Claflin University professor, I think one of the things I take pride in is being able to teach students, Black students from South Carolina, this kind of history.
Yeah.
Again, it's hard work, but it's necessary work as well, because what I find is whether it's at Claflin or to the Modjeska School, many folks from South Carolina, they may not know this history. Once they start learning a bit about it, they're hungry to learn more about it. And I think that's very telling, that despite debates about what history should be taught, most people want to know the truth. They want to know what was actually happening in the past, because I think to them, it helps them understand where they are living in the here and now.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of times the Modjeska Simkins School. Tell me about the school, why it was even launched, and what role it plays.
Right. So the Modjeska Simkins School of Human Rights is sponsored by the South Carolina Progressive Network. And it first began around 2016-17 because there was a need, there was a belief that folks in the state wanted to know more about their own history. Now, part of this links back to Simkins herself. In the 1940s, Simkins actually sponsored citizenship schools in South Carolina that basically taught people basic civics lessons, taught them how to read and write, and so forth. Lessons that were seen as crucial for being able to pass, say, a literacy test, to go vote, or just to have a sense of your own rights as a citizen of the state. The Modjeska School also follows the tradition of the Freedom Schools in Mississippi in 1964, which were launched by civil rights activists to help train folks living in Mississippi to know what their rights were as citizens of Mississippi and of the United States. And so, in one sense, the Modjeska School is honoring her directly by being a school of learning, of history, because Simkins herself felt that it was important for folks to learn this history. But in the here and now, what we felt was important with the Modjeska Simkins School was to get across to people in South Carolina who were activists, who were just concerned citizens, that their state has a history too. We call it a people's history of South Carolina.
Right.
That doesn't just emphasize segregation, slavery, and so forth. It talks about those things, but it shifts the focus from the elite in the state to the everyday people, the men and women of the state who actually form its economy, who built its politics, who built the state from the ground up. And so our goal is to make sure that folks are aware of that history, because if they are aware of it, then we hope it can lead them to make great change for South Carolinians in the here and now.
Awesome. So who can enroll in the school?
Well, anybody can enroll in the school. It is open to everyone across the state. There is no age barrier. I can tell you we've had students who were as young as 15 or 16 in the school, and folks who were as young as 60, 65, 70.
Wow.
So it's really open to everyone. We're looking primarily for folks who live in South Carolina, of course. We have an in-person option for students who live in around Columbia, but there will also be a virtual option as well. You sign up for the course that is also offered.
How long? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say, how long is the session or the classes? Is it like a semester? Is it like, a course, or is it like an ongoing classes?
It is actually like an ongoing course. It lasts from the beginning of March through June. And usually most of the classes take place on Mondays. They're Monday evenings around 6 o'clock to 8:30. There are also Sunday sessions where we have breakout sessions for students to listen to guest speakers or do special topics like the Orangeburg Massacre or Reconstruction in South Carolina and so forth. But the class itself is really designed for folks who can attend Monday nights. It's from roughly around 6:30 to really 8:30. But basically, it is like a semester-long course. It begins with the history of indigenous folks in South Carolina, Native Americans. It begins with Africans in West Africa. We make sure to emphasize that Black history does not begin with slavery. And then we move through the history of the state from the Revolutionary era through the Civil War up to the present day. But each class is on a different topic in that history. And every class discussion and every class itself links back to issues in South Carolina in the present day. So This is a history course that actually answers the question that historians often like to ask, so what? In our case, the answer to that is South Carolina's history explains what the state's like today. It may give us some solutions to make the state a better place for tomorrow.
Great, awesome. And so the course this time the course starts in March. And if people want to enroll, what do they do, Dr. Greene?
Their best option is to go to the Modjeska Simkins School website, and I'll get that URL for you right now. Essentially, it is scpronet, that's scpronet.com/Modjeska School /. Or if you do a search for Modjeska School of Human Rights on Google or Yahoo, whatever you use, you'll find it pretty quickly. There you can actually sign up for the class. You'll find more details about the class there as well.
Yeah, people can see the information on the screen. So please don't forget to register for the school. If you're just interested in knowing more about Black history, knowing more about Modjeska Simkins, and I think it's a great course too for people to become more more of an advocate for things in our city, in our state, in our world. Even if you're thinking about running for an office or something like that, I think this would be a great opportunity to learn more about kind of what's been and what is, because, as the old saying says, we can't know any more about ourselves today if we don't know about yesterday. That's not the saying, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Well, no, you're exactly right.
Dr. Robert Greene joins us. He's author and professor of Claflin University, and he's working with the Modjeska Simkins School, where it represents a different path for teaching and learning history. In addition to the home that is up, what are some of the other ways that South Carolina is paying tribute to Modjeska Simkins, Dr. Greene?
Well, there are a couple of other ways they've done so in the past. There is a painting of Simkins in the State House. If you go inside, there's a painting of her there. Also, ETV made a great documentary about her life that premiered, I think, 1989 or thereabouts. It's not shown very often anymore, but it actually does a wonderful job of showing just how rich her life was as both a person and an activist. But beyond that and the actual historic site, there aren't really very many other markers to Simkins in the state of South Carolina. And I think, again, that's a testament to how radical an activist she truly was, and also how her story kind of upends the narrative of South Carolina as a state that was just moderate, that safely transitioned to civil rights. Her story offers a counterpoint to all of that.
Yeah, but people can still go by and see the home. It is open for people to see. As you say, the Historic Foundation of Historic Columbia is taking care of and preserving that site.
Exactly. Yes, they are.
Yeah. All right. Dr. Robert Greene is assistant professor at Claflin University. He is also working with the Modjeska Simkins School. You can see more information about the school on the screen. If you are interested in enrolling in the course from March until June, you can visit the site and get more information about Modjeska Simkins and the Modjeska Simkins School. Dr. Greene, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for not only advocating for Modjeska Simkins, but for advocating and being intentional about teaching our young people and all people in South Carolina, not only about her, but about the significance of African Americans as it relates to not only Black history, but South Carolina history in a place, in a state where we don't always hear that things are happening here. And I just think it is so very important for us to know that it has happened here before, and however challenging it might be, it can and will happen again. And it can happen through anyone. If it happened for Modjeska Simkins, it could happen through you also. So thank you.
Exactly. Thank you so much for having me there. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Once again, more information is on the screen, so please visit the website for more information. We'll be right back with more Coping next. I'm Tre Tailor. Thanks.
Computers, they're a part of our everyday lives. But when they're not working, they're an everyday problem. So call Computers Unique, your everyday solution. 803-351-5821. Is your computer running slow? Won't turn on? Do you need a screen replaced? Or maybe you just need another computer? Well, Computers Unique is your one-stop shop for all your computer needs. They have a wide variety of new and pre-owned PCs, Macs, and tablets. So call Computers Unique, Dutch Square Mall. 803-351-5821. 803-351-5821.
Hello, I'm Carolyn Sawyer, an entrepreneur and caregiver. Part of taking care of your health is knowing if you're at risk of type 2 diabetes. Prediabetes is serious and puts you at risk for developing type 2 diabetes. Up to 90% of South Carolinians who have it don't know they have it. Visit inittogethersc.org. Take an online test to find out your risk and join a diabetes prevention program. This message brought to you by the Diabetes Action Council of SC.
Thank you so much for joining us for Coping with Tre Tailor. If you have a product or service that could help someone cope with COVID, please email copingwithtreTailor@gmail.com. We would love for you to be a proud sponsor, just like In It Together SC and the Diabetes Action Council. They sponsor Wellness Wednesday every Wednesday here on Coping with COVID. Javis Tax Services, Palmetto Media Connections, the Fifth Circuit Solicitor's Office, Attorney Byron Gibson, Agape Counseling and Training Services, Black Pages, Black Expo, the Comet Bus System, and Computers Unique, Dutch Square Mall. We also would love for you to be a guest on the show. If you have a story or initiative that could help someone cope with COVID, please email booking@copingwithtreTailor.com. Booking@copingwithtreTailor.com. That information is scrolling at the bottom of the screen. We would love to feature you on the show because we're always coping with something. As always, we leave you with a great devotional. I'm reading back again from Jesus Calling. This says, when things seem to be going all wrong, stop and affirm your trust in me. Calmly bring these matters to me and leave them in my capable hands. Leave them there. Then simply do the next thing. Stay in touch with me through thankful, trusting prayers, resting in my sovereign control. Rejoice in me. Exult in the God of your salvation. As you trust in me, I make your feet like the feet of a deer. I enable you to walk, to make progress upon your high places of trouble, suffering, or responsibility. When things are going wrong, remember what is right. Jesus, he can do it for you. Thank you guys so much for joining us today for Coping with Tre Tailor. Until the next time, I wish you peace and abundant blessings. Take care, stay well, God bless. And if you're going to be out and about with large crowds, especially inside, don't forget to wear your mask over your nose and under your chin. I'll see you soon.
Coping, find peace of mind to survive through whatever. Coping, learning the way that we thrive all together. Coping, finding out what's real. Coping, we can heal, we can heal. Coping with stress, coping with strife, bringing hope for success, for improving our life. Coping beyond hoping to do more than survive, ways to live a healthy life. Coping and promoting learning what you can do, 6 ways to a better you.